Hey, good morning everybody, and welcome back to Reptiles in the News. This first story that I'm just going to go ahead and start to cover is pretty cool. It's about a new venomous snake that is found in Australia. I think it's absolutely amazing that, again, we continue to see new species of snakes found. In this case, it was found in the Cape York region by Brian Fry and Freek Vaunt. It turned out that they found a black and white banded animal that they hadn't seen before. It was part of the bandy family, and later, after some research, they found that it was a new species that they later ended up naming Vernomous parscata. Now later on they found another live specimen, a dead specimen on a road that had been run over, and then ultimately two more specimens that were preserved in snake museums. It's just amazing that these guys have been out finding new species for quite some time. Freek Vaunt actually is a guy over in the Netherlands that has a show. He's kind of like the Netherlands Steve Irwin, a really good guy, also a doctor in herpetology, and we all know Brian Fry is really known for venom research. In a statement, Fry said that this region minor is a major economic activity in the region and may be reshaping the environment to the detriment of native plants and animals. Furthermore, he said, every species is precious and we need to protect them all since we can't predict where the next wonder drug will come from. He said, the discovery of this enigmatic little snake is symptomatic of much of the fundamental problems of how little we know about our biodiversity and how much may be lost before we ever discover it. And I couldn't agree more. You know, the problem with all the deforestation, whether it be in Madagascar, South America, or even in the mining areas of Australia, the fact is that there are species of animals that are basically being wiped out before we can even discover them. And like Brian Fry said, there might be some wonder drug, whether it's from venom or maybe bugs or plants or who knows what the case is. But I want to know from you guys, I mean, how do you feel about the deforestation and how we might be actually losing some really precious species without ever even having the chance to discover them? And in this next story, it's going to start out, Florida man. I'm not exactly sure why so many crazy things happen to Florida people because, you know, I love you guys from Florida, but it is true. You're a little bit crazy, aren't you? In this case, a guy was playing disc golf, and believe it or not, he went to retrieve his frisbee, and sure enough, an alligator grabbed his arm. His name was Richard Peel, and witnesses actually said that the animal grabbed him, and a number of people ran over to try to help him, and they linked arms and retrieved him from the pond and from the gator's mouth. Now this kind of reminds me of that one scene in Happy Gilmore. Derek Moody actually lives by, and he said that he heard the kind of reports of, again, this heroic type of saving. In the end, Peel was taken to the doctors. It was relatively insignificant injury, so it definitely wasn't a life-threatening situation. As with every one of these situations, the FWC not only removed that alligator from the water, but also a smaller alligator, and I fear that they were probably euthanized because that's typically the protocol that happens down in Florida. Once again, we see the animals paying prices for what they were meant to do, which is to live in peace and try to just find happiness and food. In the end, because the alligator mistook Peel for food, they ended up losing its life. Again, I bring it to you guys to tell me how you feel about this. Do the alligators really deserve to lose their life? How do we live together symbiotically between alligators and people? And why do Florida people always seem to be the one that are on the top of this topic? Let me know what your guys' thoughts are on this. And then in this next story, you gotta love Australia. Sure enough, I suppose someone came home from work. They heard some rustling in their air duct, and sure enough, two male coastal carpet pythons fell through the ceiling onto the floor. They ended up calling a snag catcher named Lana Fields. She ended up Facebook living this event, and this video happened.
People often mistake this as mating, but it is combat. So they'll wrap around each other, wrestling, to compete and see who is the strongest. And that will give them the right to pursue the female that's obviously in the area. And they know she's around because she's left pheromones. So see the intertwining, and then the wrestling thump down.
In a statement, Lana said, this pair has been being a little bit naughty. She said they left a bit of a mess. And basically what happened is, of course, two males can actually combat, especially during breeding season, oftentimes being mistaken for breeding because they intertwine each other and actually will go back and forth. In actuality, male and females do intertwine their tails, but they never kind of thrash around and roll around. In this case, they thrashed around, rolled around enough to actually fall right through the ceiling. Thankfully, Lana was close, and I guess she had enough wit to to her to actually Facebook Live it. So thank you, Lonnie, for that footage. It was absolutely amazing. But I don't know about you guys. I actually wish something like this would happen. I think it'd be cool to come home from a long day of work, sit down, and have some pythons up in my air ducts. The bigger question is, was there another animal around, like a female that these two males were fighting, or were they just staking their claim to that particular area? I don't know, but I'd like to know from you guys. Would you guys like to find a couple of fighting male carpet pythons inside your air duct? I think it would be pretty cool. And as with every week, I take a break from the news to kind of share with you the things that I have found on the interwebs this week that I absolutely love. And I'm going to start with this amazing axanthic clown ball python produced by Juggernaut Reptiles. I tell you what, that's a double recessive mutation, and it is absolutely stunning. This next one was actually a Champagne Enchi Freeway by Breeders' Circle. That is a stunning animal. As a matter of fact, I was over at my friend Billy from Mutation Creation this last week, and he had some amazing freeway combinations, but this one is truly amazing as well. I have to highlight this one because I've been kind of becoming a little bit of a Viper Boa addict, to be honest with you. I love Viper Boas. I want to get a bunch, and this one was absolutely stunning from Ultimate Exotics. Holy cow, that animal is on fire, and all I know is I want it. And then there's these Leucistic Cottonmouths from Hunter Stanley. Oh my gosh. And I love Echistrodon, so a Leucistic Cottonmouth is absolutely amazing. And each week there's a photo contest winner on the Brian Barczyk fan page, so you guys are absolutely amazing. And this week it was Riley Jimison with a handful of amazing snakes. Again, if you guys want to join, I'll put a link in the description. It's a fantastic group of positive people that doesn't allow any of the drama that happens to sometimes float around the interwebs. In this last story, it's pretty interesting. They actually realized that the forest cobra in Africa that was thought to be one species was actually 5 species. Now, Wolfgang Woolster from Bangor University in the UK was doing research about 15 years ago on other animals, and while he was doing that research, he actually took DNA from a number of species of forest cobra, and it kind of got put on the back burner for the time being. But now that they went ahead and restudied it, they realized that the mitochondrial DNA sequencing of these animals actually separated them into 5 species, not just one species. Woolster basically said that sometimes it's really difficult for scientists to actually identify different species within a venomous community, because if they don't visually look different, it's very hard to collect the samples. He said, after all, these are very dangerous animals, and again, if you're out in the bush doing a field study and you come across a forest cobra, sometimes it's hard to catch that forest cobra and take DNA samples. But in this case, he actually did this about 15 years ago to now come up with the results that they have now. Woolster said, for instance, in parts of the Congo, the Central African forest cobra and the brown forest cobra are very similar indeed. He furthermore said there are certainly room for more work to find better ways of distinguishing them from their external features. However, using DNA to confirm the ID of specimens and further establish the distribution limits of 4 mainland species will be valuable in any case. As a single species, the forest cobra wasn't really considered to be threatened, but now that they're split into 5 different species, there are certain species that could actually be in vulnerability due to deforestation and even the hunting of bushmeat. Woolster said the West African banded seems to be relatively uncommon, and we need more information on its status. He also said that the Sao Tome forest cobra is probably of most concern, and it is restricted to the forest parts that are relatively a small island and thus inherently more vulnerable. These findings thus allow us to include these snakes into evidence-based monitoring and management strategies. On top of that, splitting these forest cobras into 5 species can have some implication on the anti-venin, because different species of cobras can actually have different proteins. In turn, the anti-venin may not be suitable for all 5 species that is currently available. Another scientist, Shirako, said, forest cobras are highly venomous and cause severe health problems to human communities who deal with them. He also said, we know that each species has its own venom with different biochemical characteristics and effects. Right now, we do have some anti-venins for forest cobra bite, but with splitting of these species into 5, new research needs to be investigated of the venom of each species to develop adequate antivenins. So as you can see, even though it's really exciting that the forest cobra seems to be 5 species instead of 1 species, it does have a little bit of concern with the health and human issue with the whole antivenin problem. But in the meantime, we have to really understand which one of these species needs to be really looked at and potentially preserved. I think it's really quite amazing, and I think that that just shows us how much work we still have to do all across the globe. I'm sure there's plenty of animals across the globe that are actually more species than are actually being described right now. In some cases, some of those subspecies or species could be threatened, and we don't actually know them. In particular, you think of all the islands of Indonesia and how the fact that there are little populations of different species that could be completely radical different from their mainland version. There has to be a lot more research, and that's why being a herpetologist or a biologist of any sort is really such an amazing career path, and one that I really wanted to go on before I decided to breed reptiles. The fact is, I am fascinated by this type of stuff, but I'd like to know from you guys, what did you think about this story, and what did you think about any of the other stories? Let me know in the comments if you have any stories you'd like me to share next week, or any animals that you thought were just beautiful and you think I should give a little shout out to next week. In the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and end this Reptiles in the News. Wish you guys a good day. Make sure to be kind to someone, and I promise I'm going to see you next Friday for Reptiles in the News.